Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. This episode is dedicated to the curious mind, history lovers, and everyone who is interested in learning from our past in order to correct our future steps. We're going to be talking about the often debated Japanese kamikaze pilot. When most people think of the Japanese kamikaze pilot, we think of these highly trained swordsmen, ninja fighters whose whole mission was to commit horrendous acts against America and its allies. World War II started in 1939 and ended in late 1945. On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked by a fleet of Japanese fighter pilots. Most of these pilots were between the age of 17 and 24, and it is highly reported that most of them were heavily medicated. This is what we know, but how did we get there? During World War II, Japan also occupied the country currently known now as North and South Korea. The separation did not happen until much later. So is it a case of the fact that the Japanese kamikaze pilots were suffering from their own karma because the military of Japan and Korea were not nice? But if we really take a step back and put this within the bucket of Zen Buddhism, we know that there's the yin and there's the yang, meaning there's negative and there's positive. I'm not going to be able to go too deep in 10 minutes within all aspects of negative and positive influences. But one thing we know for certain is that the Japanese kamikaze pilots, even though they were not involved in taking over North and South Korea, had the same sort of Zen idea and principle of self-sacrifice, meaning they were sacrificing themselves for the better good of their nation, and they really put their discipline in the front of their own morals at times. How soldiers manage to go through that level of discipline, in my opinion, is something that needs to be respected purely from a military strategy point of view. From a spiritual point of view, from a religious point of view, it's a bit more difficult. But history happens, and those who live to tell the tale can only provide their opinion and perhaps lessons learned. Throughout this presentation, you will see images of Japanese fighter pilots that did not make it back. However, there were a handful of Japanese kamikaze pilots that made it back. If you read Mainichi Shimbun, you will hear what they had to say. The idea that they were fed was self-sacrifice for the nation. In the 14th century, Japan had various monks. These monks were called Sohei. These are not typical monks, these were warrior monks. These monks would service out their skills to various shogun in order to support various military strategies. And in doing so, they use Zen Buddhism as their anchor to continue taking over other prefectures, fighting, and even in training. For those of you who are familiar with Zen Buddhism, there are various steps to reach Zen. It takes a lot of discipline, character, and most of all, sacrifice. By juxtaposing that idea with the self-sacrifice presented by the kamikaze pilots, you can see there's a level of spiritualism that they had to engage. But let's not make any mistakes. If we really think about this, from what we can see, these guys were being fed a lot of prescriptions. We're talking about a pill called Pillopon, and it was heavily laced with meth. Meth has the adverse effect of making you feel very euphoric even when you are doing something negative. The American TV series Breaking Bad popularized methamphetamine. The history of meth started in 1938 when a psychologist in the German army guessed that methamphetamine could keep tired pilots alert and the entire army euphoric. This quote was published in a magazine called Der Spiegel. However, there was little research done with regards to the negative impact of meth itself. Over 3,800 kamikaze pilots perished during World War II. Quite a few American pilots, servicemen and women also perished. During that period, it's very safe to say that the level of control that we have when it comes to prescription drugs was very much different, very much more laissez-faire. If we really look at that and put everything in perspective, I argue for some empathy for both sides of the coin. We have those that attacked America, and we have those that lived to survive to tell the tale. I was in New York when 9/11 happened. Comparing that specific experience with what has happened in World War II, specifically from the point of view of the kamikaze pilots and the fact that they were on suicide missions, I'm conflicted. Honestly, I'm conflicted because for me, an act of terrorism is still an act of terrorism. Let me know your thoughts and opinion. I wanted to provide a more personal look at kamikaze pilots and also incorporate the idea of Zen Buddhism. As I mentioned previously, Japan, during its feudal time, had shoguns. They also had warrior monks. And if we look at this from a purely cinematic point of view, all we see is just moving images. Samurais versus ninjas, and so on. But we never really take the time to ask what makes these soldiers tick, pardon the pun. The reality is there's a greater level of self-sacrifice and discipline that we can all learn from, whether those soldiers are American, Italian, British, Japanese, and so on. There's a lot of self-respect and sacrifice on all sides of the coin. Again, as a reminder, when we say that the Japanese fighter pilots were taking crank, meth, the truth can also be said for a lot of US soldiers. Again, this is not an us versus them, but rather it's all out in the open. You can check out Wikipedia, check the facts, let me know what you think, and leave a comment. What can we learn from the past so we can have a better future? Thank you very much for joining me. Have a great one.